So we have the question which says consider the SLR1 and LLR1 parsing tables for a context-free grammar. Then which of the following statement is true? So we have to pick out the true statement out of these four. So let's see what other statements are. So the first option says the go-to part of both the tables may be different, or the shift entries of both the tables may be different, or the reduce entries in the tables may be different, or the error entries are identical in both the tables. Okay, so let's see. So in SLR1 and LLR1, if you have solved the question, you know in SLR1 the reduce entries are only put into the follow in the follow part of the symbol. Okay, and in LLR1 they the reduce entries are put only in the look ahead symbols of the table. Okay, what I'm saying here is, I'll tell you with the example. So just imagine some context-free grammar is given, and out of which I am just extracting a middle part here to make you understand how it is done. So let's say this is the closure. Okay, and let's say t gives dot I. So by seeing itself, you can see this is for the SLR1 because there are no look ahead symbols. So I will make few transitions. So forget about everything else. I'm only focusing here on the reduce entries only, because that is the part we have to be careful. Obviously the answer here is the reduce entries in the tables may be different. Okay, but let's see how. So there will be some transitions on E and then T. So we know how they are done, so that's not my concern here. See, look, this one is the reduce entry. So for I, it will give the transition I dot. Okay, now in SLR1, let's say if this is I1, then I'll have I2, I3, I4. Let's say this one is I5. Okay, so in the fifth, in my SLR parsing table, this reduce entry will be put in fifth row, but only in the follow of T. If the follow, what is the follow of T here? It is follow of E. And what is follow of E here? It is dollar. Okay, so it will be put under dollar only. So that this is how it is done in SLR1. We are going to put this reduce entry only in the follow of this particular symbol. We will find the follow from the grammar, and that is how it is done. Now let's look for the LLR parsing table. Okay, let's imagine a different scenario. Let's say here, and this is my look ahead symbol for the first one. Then let's say this is for the next one, defined for A and B look aheads, and let's not make big one, and let's say these are the entries defined here. Okay, again we don't care about the A entries or dot A entries, whatever. Let's focus on this one entry only, because this is directly giving me the reduce move. So for B, it will give A gives B dot for the symbol look ahead symbol A and B. So let's say this one is I0, then I'll have I1, I3, I4, whatever. Let's say this one is I6. So in the LLR parsing table, in the sixth row, this particular reduce entry will be put only under the terminal symbols A and B only. Okay, that's why the reduce entries in both the tables are different, because in SLR1 we have just seen the reduce entries are put on the follow symbol of this particular non-terminal symbol, and in the LLR1 they are put in the look ahead symbols. So that's why there are only changes, can be changes in the reduce entry of the tables. So we have our next question, which says which of the following is true while converting context-free grammar to LL1 grammar. So we know that LL1 grammar is a context-free grammar, but it is not necessarily true that the context-free grammar is also LL1 grammar. Okay, because context-free grammar is sometimes ambiguous, and we do not parse ambiguous grammars on our LL1 grammar. So that's why. So they are saying they can be converted by removing left recursion alone, or factoring grammar alone, or both of the above, or none of the above. Okay, so let's see. So we know that LL1 grammar is a top-down parser. Okay, LL1 is a top-down parser, so there should not be any backtracking. And to ensure that there should not be two things in LL1 grammar, there should not be left recursion, first thing, and there should not be any non-determinism. Okay, I'll explain you what these are. So first one is left recursion. To be a LL1 grammar, there should not be any left recursion. Now, what is left recursion? Let's say it is the type of production like this: beta, alpha star. Okay, it means A is producing, let's say, A and then alpha. Again, A is producing A, alpha, A, alpha, A, alpha. So if you look at this example, in this what is happening is, without producing any terminal symbol, A is producing first itself and then producing terminal symbol. It means why we use the parser to derive the string. Okay, but here what it is doing is, it is producing first a non-terminal symbol and then terminal symbol, and that gives the problem of left recursion. What we want to see the production of terminal symbols, but first we have to produce the non-terminal symbol, so that this problem is known as left recursion. So it should not be there. Okay, removing left recursion, so it should not be there. The second one is determinism, or also known as, solving this problem is known as factoring grammar. What is this is, I'll give you example for this. So let's say my grammar is given like alpha p1, alpha p2. There's no left recursion, but still the problem, let's see. Now what happened is, these are common suffixes over here. Okay, now I don't know which production has to use, because in the first step, when I use, let's say I want to use this one. Okay, but what is happening is, A is producing first alpha b1, but when I come to this step, then I came to know that no, this is not what I wanted. So what I will do, I will backtrack here. So this is not good here. There should not be any non-determinism. So to remove this, what we will do, we will postpone the decision. How this problem is solved? What we will do, we will postpone the decision. The problem is created because these suffixes are same, and then we are falling under the problem of backtracking. So what we will do, we will postpone the decision. How? I will do this. So when this will see this, it will jump to the next conclusion, then it will wait for A1. Then I can produce either B1, B2 and B3. Okay, and for this also we can convert the grammar. Okay, so the problem here, removing the left recursion and factoring grammar, these both should be done. So that's why answer is C here. Both the problems must be solved here. Okay. So we have our next question. This kind of question is frequently been asked in exam, so pay attention here. So it says, count the number of tokens in the following expression. It is used during the lexical analyzer, so that's why it is very useful. What happens is, we will count each and every occurrence of whether it is a variable, symbol, any expression, keyword or anything. We have to count each and everything. Okay, so let's see how many tokens are there in this expression. Okay, let me use different marker here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15. So answer is B here. Okay, so just simply count everything. Why is this one? Because this is the operator, and operator. Okay, this is counted as 1. Okay, one more example. Let's say I have some printf expression and something is printed over here. Let's say hello or whatever, %d and whatever. So when they ask how many tokens are there, this is 1, 2, and this whole under the double quotes is always counted as 1. So it is 3, 4 and 5, so 5 tokens. Do not count everything over here, okay? It is considered as one string, so inside double quote is considered as one, okay? You can solve many more questions to see how it has been done. So here in this question the answer is B here, 15. So we have next question which says which of the following is the most powerful parsing method, okay? So they have given 4 parsers over here, so I have directly given you this diagram here. So from this you can say CLR is the most powerful parser, canonical LR parser, okay? So when they talk about the powerful parsing method, it means they are judged on the basis of two things, okay? There should be less errors or no errors, or you can say conflicts, okay? And the second, how they are judged on the basis of languages they can parse, okay? Out of all, CLR can parse almost all the languages, that's why it is the most powerful, okay? And on the basis of conflicts, we have seen in LR0 there are more conflicts, and there are less conflicts in SLR. How? Because in this the reduced conflicts, the reduced moves are only put in the follow symbol, while in LR0 they are put in the whole row. That's why here the RR and SR conflicts are more. In SLR, reduced conflicts are very less. Then in the CLR and in LLR, in this both we use look ahead symbol to put the reduce moves, but in LLR what we do is we merge, and that's why there could be sometime conflict. So that's why CLR is most powerful of all, okay? So clearly D is the answer. You can make a note of this diagram, it will be very useful for you for further questions. There are questions regarding these type of their power, arranging orders and lots of things, so you can make a note of this question. So we have next question here. So we have to, they are saying which of the following is false. So we have to pick out the false statement, okay? So the first option says the grammar, so they have given a grammar where S is the only non-terminal symbol and epsilon is the null string, is ambiguous. So we have to check whether this following grammar is ambiguous or not. Second option says SLR is more powerful than LLR. For that I have given this diagram, so from this only you can tell whether it is right or wrong. Third one says an LL1 parser is a top-down parser. And the D option says YACC tool is an LLR1 parser generator, okay? So let's solve all the options one by one. So the first option says the grammar, so they have given a grammar, S derives, A as B, or B as A, or 2 as an epsilon, okay? It's a ambiguous, so we have to prove that it is ambiguous. Now to be ambiguous, what is the property? If it can generate more parse trees for the same string, then we say that the given grammar is ambiguous. What I'm saying is, let's say I want to generate the string AB, AB, and let's say AB, okay? So this is the string, let's say. So what I will do, I will use this grammar and I will see if I can give more parse trees for the same given string, okay? So let's see. So let's say I am deriving first A as, and let's say B. Let's use, next I want B, right? So I will use this production. So let's say B, S and A. Third I want A, so let's use this production again. So it is A, S, B. So it is A, B, A, B already produced, so last one will be epsilon. So we know how to traverse a tree from top to down, left to right. So it will be A, B, A, epsilon, B, A, B. So A, B, A, B, A, B is produced perfectly, okay? So let's see if I can generate one more parse tree for the same given string or not. So let's do. So let's say I am producing first A, S and B. So let me use this production this time. So let's say S and let's say S. So next one I want this again. So what I will do, let's produce B, S and A, Okay, so it will be A, B, A. Next I want B, right? So again I will use the same production. With practice you will learn very easy. It is very easy. You just have to see the string. I want to produce A, B, so first I will use this production. Next, after producing this, I want a B, so I will use this production. Okay, so this is epsilon and the epsilon. So I have told you how to parse a tree from top to down and left to right. So it is A, B, A, B, then A, and B. So same string is produced. So I have given two parse tree for the same given string, so that's why the grammar is ambiguous. So this option is right here, but we have to pick out the false, so this is not the option here. Okay, whenever they ask about the ambiguity, always try to make different parse tree for the given, for the same string. Okay, so for my same string I have given two parse tree, so that's why the grammar is ambiguous. So the next option, SLR is more powerful than LLR. No, this is false. In this diagram and in the previous fourth question itself, I have shown this diagram that SLR is not powerful than LLR. LLR is more powerful and CLR is the most powerful. So B option is false, so that's why it is the answer here. Now next option says an LL1 parser is a top-down parser. Yes, this option is also right. LL1 parser is a top-down parser, while our LR0, SLR, LLR and CLR, they all are bottom-up parsers. Okay. Now next, YACC tool is an LLR1 parser generator. This is also right. This is a powerful parser. That's why YACC tool also uses this parser. Okay. So first C and D are right, but we have to pick out the false option. That's why the B is the answer here. So we have our next question, which says which of the following is not an advantage of using shared dynamically linked libraries as compared to statically linked libraries. So in shared dynamically linked libraries, what happens is we linked our files during the runtime, not the compilation time. Okay, so there are some advantages and disadvantages attached with it. So let's see, they're talking about not an advantage. Okay, so let's read the option one by one. So first says smaller size of executables. This is true. This is the advantage of dynamically linked libraries. Actually what happens is, for the dynamic linked libraries, the different library file is maintained. That's why, and they are separate. Actually dynamically linked libraries are separated from the executable. DLL are separated from executables, and this is the reason why they also have the lesser number of page faults. Okay, so the second one is also right here. Here the page fault ratio is also less. Also the other reason is the library file which we maintain it dynamically, it is a very rare case that our OS will swap it out. Okay, they are always kept in main memory, so that is the reason there are lesser number of page faults. Also DLR are separated from executables. That is the reason executable size is generally very small. Okay, so the next is faster program setup. This is clearly not an advantage of a dynamically linked library. Even if you think logically, what happens is during the dynamic time we have to link everything. So obviously if I am postponing my work during the runtime, it will take a lot of more time for the startup. That is the reason C option is right here, because we have to mention the not an advantage. Okay, so C is right answer here. So fourth option says existing program need not to be relinked to take advantage of newer versions of libraries. This is also right. This is an advantage, you can say, because what happens is when the new versions are available, we don't have to worry about it. Because why? Because in dynamic we are going to link during the runtime, during the execution time, not at the compile time. So we don't maintain any executable files or anything here. What we do during the runtime, they are combined, and at that time we need these libraries, so we don't need to have all the resources combined with us during the compilation time. So that's why even if we use newer version at the runtime itself, they will combine automatically. So this is also an advantage of our dynamically linked libraries. So C, faster programs startup. From the logically you can think that if something is postponing their work until the runtime of the program, obviously during the startup of the program it will take time. Okay, so that's why this is the reason they take more time during the setup. DLL takes takes more time in startup. You can make a note of this point. This is important, been referenced in many questions. Okay, we have next question which says type checking is normally done during lexical analysis, syntax directed translation, or the code generation. Okay, so for this question, what we will do, we will rule out the options one by one, and then we will see the right answer. Okay, so let's see, they're talking about the type checking. So let's see it is done in which step. So first they are saying the lexical analysis. No, in the lexical analysis we create the lexemes, white spaces and blank spaces, they are removed. So that kind of work is done by the lexical analysis, not the type checking. There might be confusion there. You might will think that it is done by the syntax analysis. No, syntax analysis is actually done by the parsers to check, and they make the parse tree to check whether the syntax is correct or not. Whether like suppose if we are giving an expression or a grammar, we will check if the following given string is following the perfect syntax of the given program or not. So for that purpose we use the syntax analysis, not for the type checking. Okay, before coming to C option, let's see the D option, code generation. Definitely not. Code generation is a step in which what we do is, before the code generation steps, whether it is lexical analysis, syntax analysis, or semantics analysis, they all are independent, machine independent. In the code generation itself, we make the code machine dependent, whether you want to have 3 addressable code, 4 address code, or what kind of code you want. So in that step, code generation step, we do all those things. So clearly type checking is also not done by a code generation. And yes, the answer is syntax directed translation. Okay, so always imagine syntax directed translation is grammar plus semantic rules. We know why we use semantic analysis, to check whether something written is making sense or not. Okay, so basically type checking is done by the syntax directed translation. Here I have given you an image. This is the type checking SDT given over here. You can check the term expression plus term. Here we are comparing whether it is an integer, or we are checking whether it is a boolean variable. So this is the program given over here. You might have read about the many SDT examples. So basically type checking for this is the SDT given here. There are so many ways you can make an SDT. More simpler way are also there, but all I wanted to do is I wanted to show you the syntax, how SDT is been done. Like here they are saying if expression is int n, it is int, then only the expression translation will be an integer, otherwise it will generate an error. Okay, so if there are only integers to be used, then there should be integers only. And if we are comparing, like if I'm saying if 3 equal to 3, the output given will be in boolean, not in integer. Okay, so for that we are only doing for the integer and boolean. So that's why type checking is, this is how we have done. Okay, so it is done by the syntax directed translation. Direct answer. We have next question which says what is the similarity between LR, LLR and SLR parsers. Okay, so the option given are, they use the same algorithm but different parsing table, they use the same parsing table but different algorithm, or their parsing tables and algorithms are similar but uses top-down approach. This is clearly wrong. They use the bottom-up approach. And D option says both parsing table and the algorithm are different. Okay, so let's see, they are basically talking about the parsing table and algorithm. Okay, so let's look at the first option, parsing table. Now we have seen the parsing table are different for all these 3 parser. In LR, the reduce moves are put in the whole row, and there are high chances of SR and RR conflicts, while in SLR we put the reduce move only in the follow symbol, and in LLR we have look ahead symbols, and only there we put a reduce move. So obviously the parsing table is different for all the 3, so it is different. Now let's see what about the algorithm. Okay, so always remember, all the parsers, they use the same algorithm, and which is, I will give you example here. they use, let's say some have some input buffer which is marked by the dollar ending. Then they have parser. This can be any parser, LR, LALR or SLR. Okay. Next, on the basis of our parser, we will have parsing table. So that's why this step is different for all the three. We have different parsing table for all the parsers. Okay. And we have stack. The bottom of the stack is dollar. We have stack and we use this. So basically stack, it is used for parsing. Okay. So if you will see, for no matter what the parser is, they use the same algorithm. They have input buffer, then the parser, any of the parser, and on the basis of that they create the parsing table, and they use the stack also for the parsing. Okay, so they use same algorithm but different parsing table, and which matches with the option A here. They use the same algorithm but different parsing table. You can remember these points. Okay, they use different parsing table. We have seen due to the RR reduce move where they put it, that creates the different, and also it also shows which one is powerful. That's why LLR is powerful because here the reduce conflicts are very less. Okay, so that's why. We have our next question, which says which of the following grammar rules violate the requirement for an operator grammar. Okay, so they have given us few grammar rules and they are asking us which of the one violates the requirement for the operator grammar, also operator precedence grammar. So always remember, this parser is used to define the mathematical operators to the parsers. Okay, now for this there are two rules. First rule is their two variables should never be adjacent. Two variables should never be adjacent. Now if you will think logically, how? Because this is used to define the mathematical operators through the parser. Now when we solve any mathematical question, multiplication of two numbers, we simply write AB is equals to 12 or whatever. This is right. Okay, but computer do not understand this. AB means nothing. So what we do when we write a computer program, we write A star B equals to 12. Okay, so same way here, two variables should not be adjacent to each other. So if we look at the first production here, the two variables, these are the variables, they are adjacent to each other. These are terminals. Okay, and these are variables. So they are saying, the first rule says two variables should never be adjacent. So that's why the first production is violating the rule. Okay, second one is not a problem because the variables are separated by a terminal. This could be an operator also. Okay, so this is not violating. The third one is also violating. There are two, I have told you, there are two rules for the operator grammar. First one is two variables should never be adjacent and no null production. No null production. Okay, in the operator grammar there are no null production, so that's why the third one is also violating the rule over here. Okay, so in the fourth option, if you look, the variables are separated by the terminals. Okay, so that is why the fourth option is not violating anything. So that's why which of the options are violating the rule? First and third, which is matching with the B option here. So answer is B here. So we have our question which says the graph that shows basic blocks and their successor relationship is called directed acyclic graph, flow graph, control graph, or the Hamilton graph. Okay, so you don't need to mug up anything, just always remember why we use the basic blocks. So we know the basic blocks are used to detect the flow, or you can say loop of the graph, or also the jump conditional, conditional or unconditional jump conditions. Okay, so basically we use the basic blocks for to check the flow, or you can say loop. When I want to detect the loops in my program, the flow, how they are jumping from one condition to another, that's why we use the basic block. Okay, or you can also say the jump conditions. So clearly the B is the answer over here. And how they are designed, what we do is, let's say this is my initial condition, so this is my first basic block. In this, what they are doing is T1 is equals to, they are using some mathematical computation, A minus B. If if 0, then T1 goes to B4. If this condition, if it turns out to be 0, then it will go to B4, otherwise it will go to B3. So this is a kind of jump statement, okay, here. So this is how we use our basic block, and they are used for to check the flow of our program. This is how we detect loops, this is how we detect our jump conditions, okay. So for that we use the flow graph. All other options are wrong, clearly. So we have our question which says, which concept of finite state automation is used in the compiler? Is it lexical analysis, parser, code generation, or the code optimization? Okay, so what is the property of finite state automation first? For a defined input, we will go to a particular state only. If the input string is right, then only it will reach to the final state, otherwise not. Okay, so we know, so let's read out one by one. So lexical analysis. Why we use the lexical analysis? To convert input into tokens. So basically we can say to tokenize the input, or to remove the white spaces, blank spaces and all. Okay, and this is the answer over here. Lexical analysis, yes, it is it uses the finite state automation for that. What it does is it uses regular expressions, and we know regular expressions are given for the finite state automation. It uses the regular expressions to tokenize the input. Like for a particular string, we check whether it follows the like AB star. Okay, the first should be an alphabet, after that we can give any number. Okay, so that kind of rules. Okay, so that's why it uses the regular expression, and lexical analysis, which is used to tokenize our input, uses the regular expression for its work. Okay, that's why it is lexical analysis. You might well get confused for the parsers. Yes, we do use, but we use the context free grammars for that. Okay, not the finite state automation only. It is actually more strict. Okay, so that's why. Code generation, code optimization are clearly not the answer over here. So A is the right answer here, because lexical analysis convert the input into token and it uses the regular expressions for that. So that's why. We have our next question which says, a DAG, data acyclic graph representation of a basic block allows automatic detection of local common sub-expressions, or detection of induction variables, or automatic detection of loop variant, or none of the mentioned. Okay, this is a good question. They do ask lot of theory questions from this, so you can make a note of it. I'm giving you definition. DAG is a tool that depicts the structure of basic block, we know that, which helps to see the flow of values, okay, among the basic blocks. And also it is also used for the optimization also. Okay, so you can make a note of this, why DAG is used. Now I will give you a whole example, and from that example itself you will be able to answer this particular question. Okay, so I'm erasing this one. Okay, so let's consider this example. Let's say T0 is given as A plus B. Let's say T1 is given as T0 plus C. We are using this over here. And let's say D, let's define for D is equals to T0 plus T1. So I will make a DAG for it, so you will automatically find the answer for this question. Okay, so let's make for T0 first. So how a DAG is designed, it will be A and B. Okay, this is for the T0, do remember. Okay, this is how we design. Now let's look for the T1. what it does is, we are using the same T naught, so same structure will be here, plus A and B. So what we are doing actually, we are adding just C with it. So this is how it is designed. Okay, so you can see common sub expressions. So this is for my T1. On the third step, you will understand completely. Let's say what we are doing, we are adding T0 and T1. So this is my T0. Let's make first for T0. It is A and B addition. Then I'm adding C over here. Okay, so what we are basically doing here, we are adding these two. Okay, fine. Then first what we will do, we are adding T1. Let me erase this one. Okay, to make space for here. Okay, so what we are doing here, we are adding T0 and then T1. T1 is here. Okay, so T1 is this, complete this one. So it what it is doing, it will add, this is complete, here is this one here, it is T1. Okay, and we are adding it with T0. So we have already calculated our T0, right? This one is T0, so we are directly adding it like this. This is how DAG will be made for this. Okay, so I hope you got it. For T0 we have used this expression. For T1 we have seen this expression is used over here. Due to lack of space, I have designed here. In the third step, we are using T0 and T1. T1 is calculated as T0 plus C. So this is complete T1. Then we are adding it with T0. So T0 is here. That's why it is. So DAG. So from the option itself, you can say first is the answer. Automatic detection of local common sub expression. Why? Because we are reusing the same. We have first calculated this, then we have calculated this, and we are just adding it like this. So we are automatically detecting the local common sub expressions of the basic block, and that is how the DAG is constructed for it. You can make note of this example. Okay, so first is the answer here. We have our next question, which says the computer language generally translated to pseudocode is assembly, machine, Pascal, or the Fortran. Okay, so always remember, computer language means high level language. Okay, so they are saying a high level language generally translated to pseudocode. Pseudocode are you can also called as assembly code. Okay, so conversion is actually done by the name telling itself, it is assembly. Okay, as it is the work of the assembler. Okay, so they convert the high level language into the assembly language. So it is done by the assembly, not the machine. Pseudocodes are assembly languages. Machine means 0 1, what our computer can understand. A machine language, 0 or 1 string. Okay, these are clearly not the answer. Why? Because they are talking about the conversion of high level languages, and Pascal and Fortran both are high level languages. Okay, so that's why C and D are clearly not the answer. Machine is what computer can understand, 0 or 1, and pseudocodes are the assembly languages which is done by the assembler. Okay, so first is the option here clearly. So we have our next question, which says choose the correct statement. Okay, so the first option is context-free grammar is not LR, means CFG grammar cannot be passed by the LR parser. Next says ambiguous grammar can never be LR. Okay, both of them mention or none of them mention. So we have to pick out the correct statement over here. Okay, so let's look at one by one. So context-free grammar is not passed by an LR parser. This is right. Why? Because we know context-free grammar sometimes can be ambiguous. Okay, and because of this we know no ambiguous grammar, ambiguous grammars cannot be parsed by any parser. We know this property. Except operator precedence grammar can parse the ambiguous grammar. Other than that, no parser can parse. That's why an LR parser cannot parse this. Also, the second statement is saying ambiguous grammar can never be LR. This is telling the same statement differently. So A and B, they are both correct answers. So what is the right option here? C. So we have our next question, in which we have given SDT over here. Okay, and they are saying on input this, so they have given a string, this translation scheme print. So we have to choose one of the option. They have given a input string and they have given us a syntax directed translation. What we have to do, just like what we do in CFG, what we do, we make a parse tree and then we parse the tree and we see what will be the output over here. Okay, for these kind of question you will have to practice many questions, then only you will get the idea uh, how to parse a particular string. Okay, here I will give you trick, so listen carefully. So my given string is 5 plus 6 7 over here. If I look at my SDT to print a 5, who is printing 5 and who has the capability to print 5? Only D. Okay, because it is printing id, print id dot value, so only D can produce. Okay, so whenever I want to print any integer, I mean this one, then I'll have to use the production D. Okay, now next I have this plus 6 7. Okay, now to print this plus, what transition I can use? This particular one, this is printing plus 1, so I will have to use B over here. So let's do up to this and then we will see. For 6 7 again I'll have to use this one. Okay, so I will see how I can produce D. So let's do. So here in the first A is producing B and C. Okay, now if you will look at B and C, only B has the capability to print D, B, and out of which we really need D over here. Okay, so let's B produce DB, D and B. Okay, so let's say D is producing this one, which is given our ID. Okay, and later which will be replaced by the value 5. Okay, so now after that, sorry, this B will also produce, sorry, B will also produce plus. Okay, not A. B will also B is producing DB, and after producing these, it is also printing a plus. Okay, now I have printed 5. After that I want a plus. I don't want anything over here. So what I will do, I will use the null production of the B. So I will use the null production of the B. There are so many ways to solve this kind of question. This is one of the way, and this is how I find it easier to solve. So you can also find this use the same way. Okay, so I have successfully produced my 5 and plus. Now next I want to produce 6 and 7. So to produce 6 and 7 I will have to produce D production. And who has the capability to produce D? Only B. Okay, now here we have C. Okay, so C can also, I don't need this, I don't need a plus, I have already produced my plus. Okay, so what in place of C I will produce an A, because A has capability to print a B and B can give me D. Okay, so what I will do, I will produce an A here. Okay, and my A will produce B and C. Okay, now my B has the capability to print DB. Okay, now my D, this D will be used like this, and this will be used to print the value 6. Okay, now again I have this one, I need one more to print this value. So what I will do, I will again produce this one. It will also produce plus. Okay, do not forget this plus one. B is producing DB. After producing DB, print plus. So print plus should be here. Okay, now I want one more because I want to produce 7. So in place of B I will use the production D, B, and then again plus. Okay, in place of D I will use this production and then it will be used as 7. Now I have produced my 5, I have produced my plus, I have produced my 6 and 7. Rest I will see what are produced later, but this much I wanted to produce, so this is it. So B will be replaced after that by null production, and C will also be replaced by the null production. Okay, so now how we parse our tree? From top to bottom and left to right. Okay, so let's see what is produced. So it is producing 5. Then I have null and then plus, and then let's go to the bottom. It is producing 6, perfect. Then nothing, and then it is producing 7, okay, and after that it is producing a plus, and again it is producing a plus over here, and then null production, and then done. Okay, so what is my output? 5 plus 6 7 plus plus 5 plus 6 7 plus plus. So option D is right here. Okay, so with these kind of question, there are so many ways you can solve it by looking at the SDT itself. So many times you can directly answer the question, but if you don't know, you can make a parse tree and then you can parse your tree. You just have to see what is the input given, and for that particular input which production must be used, just like we have done for the CFGs. Okay, so D is the answer here. So we have our next question, which says consider the following grammars, and they have given us 2 grammars. They are asking which of the following grammar is ambiguous. Okay, so we have to check out of these 2 which of them is ambiguous, or both of them are ambiguous. Okay, now to check if a grammar is ambiguous or not, always just pick one string, okay, and try to make more parse tree for the same given string. If you get more parse tree, it means the grammar is ambiguous. Okay, what I'm saying here is, let's say I want to derive the string a b a b, okay, and I'm talking about the first grammar. Okay, it is s derives a s b s, or b s a s, or epsilon, or lambda you can say. Okay, I want to produce a b a b, so let's say first obviously I'll use this one. So let's say a s b s. Okay, now let's say I am giving it as null. A b is produced, a and b. Now let's use this production again same way, because a b is produced. Now I want a b, so it will be a s b s. This is replaced by epsilon, epsilon, and epsilon. So it will be a b a b. Okay, so right. So let's try to make one more parse tree. If I get success in making one more parse tree for the same given string, then this grammar will be ambiguous. Okay, so let's say use the same production a s b s. Now let's see, I want after an a I just want a b. For here I use the same production and I use this one, but let me just make a few change. Let's say instead of using this one, make it as epsilon, I'm using this one. I want a b, so I will use this one production. Let's see if I can make or not. Okay, a s, this one is epsilon, this one is epsilon. So top to down, left to right, it is a b a b. I'm getting same tree but different parse tree, so first grammar is ambiguous. Okay, now let's look for the option for the second grammar. Second grammar is ASA. It will produce the kind of AAA or BAB, or okay, or I can produce BS B and then A, then A B A B A. So no matter how many strings you will take, or the parse string you will try to make, you will always get unique. You won't get the different parse tree for the same string. Okay, in fact this is a odd length palindrome, so second one is not ambiguous. Okay, so they are asking which of the following grammar is ambiguous, so only one here is the answer, because we have got more parse tree for that, but for the second one we are not getting any more parse trees. So we have our next question, which says if A is terminal and SAB are 3 non-terminals, then which of the following is regular grammar? Okay, so they have given us few options here. So for these kind of question, you just always remember how a particular grammar look like. So there are rules defined for regular grammar, context-free grammar, and so on. Okay, so always remember those rules. Okay, so for regular grammar, we know for the regular grammar we have 2 types of grammar. It is right linear grammar or left linear grammar, and for these 2 are different. Okay, so let's see. If it is right linear grammar, it will look like A gives alpha B slash beta. So it means a non-terminal symbol will give a terminal symbol followed by a non-terminal symbol or just a terminal symbol. Okay, so in right linear grammar what happens is a variable or a non-terminal symbol is present on the right side of the terminal symbol. Okay, so that's right linear grammar. In the left linear grammar, just a few modification. Let's say it will be A derives B alpha and then beta. Okay, so this is how our grammar look like. Okay, so let's look at the options here. S derives epsilon, S derives ASS. No, this is not the accepted one because we are saying after a terminal only one non-terminal is allowed. Okay, so first one is the not answer here. Now A derives AB. So, and yeah, one more thing always remember, if a grammar is given and they are asking whether it is regular grammar or not, then the whole grammar should either be right linear grammar or left linear grammar, but not both. Okay, so let's look at the B option. So the given grammar is right linear grammar, A, B and A, right? Now B derives B, A and B. So both productions are in the right format of the right linear grammar. So B option seems right here. Okay. Now C option, it is saying, I will give you one more example how we can be sure. So A producing BA, okay, it is giving the left linear grammar, but here it is producing what? A non-terminal symbol. So that's why this one is not answer here. Okay, why in regular grammar this kind of production is acceptable? Because A derives AB means when I have a state A, for my input A it will go to state B. That's why this kind of production is acceptable in my regular grammar. Okay, so always remember these how our regular grammar should look like, and always remember right linear grammar and left linear grammar, these two must be present but not both. Okay, uniquely they should present but not both. A grammar cannot be both regular right linear grammar and left linear grammar. It should be either right linear grammar or left linear grammar. So only B satisfy those properties, so B is the right answer here. So here we have the question on the basis of match of the following type question. Okay, so in this they have given us three option here and three option here, and we have to match them. Okay, so the question they are talking about is static allocation, stack allocation, heap allocation, here dynamic data structure, non-static, local variables and the global variables. Okay, so they are talking about the actually allocation of a program, how it is being done in the memory. If you know that concept, you can easily answer this question. Okay, so here I'll tell you about how when a program is created, how the memory is allocated to a particular program. Okay, for almost all the program the same concept is used. Let's say my program is a b c dot out. Okay, here this much space is, let's say, given for the global variables or static variables. Okay, local static variables. Okay, now here always remember there is no defined space for our heap and stack. Okay, what we do is we give a piece of chunk of memory, okay, and stack grows from here and heap grows from here, because we don't know the requirement of the program. So my heap can increase and stack can increase. So anyway, this is how we implement it. Okay, sometime I use more heap and sometime I use more stack, so I can the size can grow anyway. Okay, so that's why there is no specified memory for these two. Okay, they grow in opposite direction. So always remember one concept, that for the heap we use heap when we use dynamic data structure. Okay, it is the best because what we do in heap, because I have lot of memory, if I am using during the dynamic time, if my requirement increases at that time, I will take that memory from the heap. That's why dynamic data structure uses heap. Or you can also remember by stack. Why we use stack for the local variables or for the recursive functions call, if you remember. Why we use stack? Because first of all, we know the property of stack. If I want to store something temporarily, when we know about the local variables, I use the local variables only within the function call. After that I don't need it. Okay, so that's why stack is the best option for that, because I am temporarily storing my local variables and then I will use those local variable in somewhere, so I will pop them out. Okay, so stack is the best option for the local variables, and heap is used for the dynamic data structure. For global variables, static variables, we have assigned different space. Okay, so let's look at the options. So static allocation, who get the static allocation? It is the global variable. So first option matches with the R. Now stack allocation, who we get stack allocation? The local variable. So 2Q, or then obviously 3P. Heap allocation is used for the dynamic data structure. So it matches with the option, I guess, C here. Okay, so C is the answer over here. If you will look at the option, even if you know only one answer, let's see this one, R, for first option, even if you know that for the global variables we have static allocation, then you can directly answer the question. Okay, so no need to solve all the question in exam. You have to be very quick, so just look at the option. If you are 100% sure about a particular option, just see if it is the only option in among all the options, then just directly mark it. If you don't know, then it's okay, then you can solve all the other option as well, just to make sure that your answer is correct. Okay, so we have our next question, which says the following grammar is. So they have given a grammar. They are asking whether it is LR0 or not LR0 due to SR conflict, RR conflict. So what basically we have to do, we will take this grammar, we will make closures of it, and we will see if whether it is perfect or whether there is any SR or RR conflict. So let's see. So the given is A derive X, Y, Z. X derives Y, A and B. It's a dot. This is how we use, right? To see how much string we have parsed. Dot set A and dot C, and set here derives C. So this is my first closure. Okay, so here, so let's look for the X. I am producing A derives X dot YZ. Due to this dot in front of Y, now I have to parse Y, so this whole production will be used. So it will be Y derives dot set A and dot, use this slashes. Okay, okay, now due to this dot in front of Z, I have to use this production again, so it will be Z derives dot C. Okay, let's hope question won't go further than this, otherwise I won't have space. So let's say I have defined this one for the X. Let's define for the Y. For Y, it will go like X derives Y dot A, and there it is in front of terminal, so no need to proceed further. Okay, now I have defined for Y also. Now let's define for the B. Okay, so it is X derives B dot. This is a reduction here, but it is all alone, so not a problem over here. Okay, so let's derive for the Z now, this one. Okay, so it will be Y derives Z dot A. So it's not an issue because it is in front of terminal and it is the only reduction operation here, so not an issue. Okay, now let's see for the C production. So for C, here we have two production. Y is producing C dot, but the problem is Z is also producing C. It is also showing reduction move for Y and Z. So this is clearly an RR conflict. Okay, what are SR conflict? When in the same I have both shift and write and reduce operation for the same terminal, but here we have not encountered yet the SR conflict. but RR conflict is clearly over here. See, Y is also giving and transition for the C, and Z is also giving transition for the C, and they are in the same closure. So that's why it is a RR conflict. So it is not LR0. So C option says it is not LR0 due to an RR conflict. So C option is right here. So this is how it is done. We have next question which says which of the following statement is false. So we have to pick out the false statement. Okay, be careful here. Now they are given us 4 statements, so let's read. So they are saying all LR0 grammars are also LL1, all LR0 grammar are also SLR, all LR1 grammar are also LR1, or all LL1 grammars are also LR1. Okay, so for this question I have directly given you image here. You can make a note of it. They do ask many questions from this portion. Okay, so you can make a note of this. So let's read one by one and we will match it with the diagram. Okay, just make a note of it. So the first option says all LR0 are also LL1. No, it is not right. Clearly this one is LL1, but some of the grammars which are LL1 but are not LR0. Okay, so first statement is the one which is false, and that's why it is the answer. Let's solve the others also. All LR0 are also SLR1. Okay, clearly, because SLR is bigger than the LR0. Next, LALR1 are also LR1. LALR here also LR1. Yes, right. And D option says all LL1 are also LR1. If you can see, this LL1 is covered by our LR1 completely. So that's why all LL1 grammars are also parsed by the LR1. Okay, so we have to pick out the false. So A is the answer here. So we have next question which says identify the correct sequence of parser arranged in decreasing order of their power. It means the most powerful parser will be the first one. Okay, so let's read. So I have given you direct image here. So from this you can infer which parser will be the most powerful. Okay, so it is LRK, LR1, LLR, SLR, LR0. Okay, so least powerful is LR0. Okay, then SLR, LLR, then LR, and then LRK. But we are not talking about the LRK here, so forget about it. LR1 is also CLR, canonical LR. Okay, so we can see CLR is most powerful. CLR, so it is given in 2 options. Okay, CLR is most powerful, and then after that we have LLR. Okay, LLR. Then after that we have SLR. So that's create the difference between these two. Okay, so SLR is more powerful than LR. So C is the right option here. You must be wondering why LL1 is at the least. Now the problem with the LL1 is, due to its restriction, it is sometimes not considered as more powerful than LR. Why? Because it do not allow the non-deterministic grammar. Also, it do not allow the left-factored grammar, and also there is a problem of backtracking. It means LL1 grammar, what it does is it restricted that the grammar should not be left-factored and it should not be non-deterministic, so that it won't have to face the problem of backtracking, and due to which it becomes a quite restrictive type. Okay, so that's why we move more towards the LR parsers than the LL1. Also, it parses less languages than these LR. So that's why LR parsers are more powerful, and these are bottom up and this is top down. So that's why. Okay, so C is the right option here. So you can make a note of it, and yeah, always remember no parser can parse ambiguous grammar. So the grammar should be unambiguous. Only our operator precedence grammar parser, our operator precedence parser can parse ambiguous grammar. Other than that, no one can parse the ambiguous grammar, so they must be unambiguous. Okay, so make note of this diagram also. We have our next question which says, in a compiler, keywords of a languages are recognized during parsing of the program, the code generation, the lexical analysis of the program, or the data flow analysis. Okay, so we have to tell when we type the keywords like int, float, and all these things, when they are recognized in the compiler. Okay, so let's look at the first option, parsing of the program. No, this is not the answer. What is the parsing? We actually check the syntaxes of the tree. How we check it? We make the parsing tree, okay, and through that we check if the particular syntax is right or not. Okay, so obviously this is not right over here, and even by just by looking at this you can guess that if for the parsing I need to check the syntaxes, for that the keywords must be recognized by them, so this phase must be before than the parsing of the program. Okay, so just try to understand what I'm saying. Parsing of the program means the making the syntax, checking the syntaxes of the tree whether it is right or not by making the parse trees. Okay, now keyword recognition must be done before the parsing, then only it will make sense whether the syntax is right or not. Okay, and for the semantic phase also. Okay, so that's why A is clearly not the answer here. The code generation, this is obviously not the answer, because keywords, different thing, means recognizing them whether integer float given is right format or not. While in code generation what we do is we try to make the code are machine dependent, like we are using the 4 address code, 3 address code, like these. Okay, so not the answer. The lexical analysis of the program, yes, C is the answer over here. Why we use the lexical analysis? We actually use this to tokenize our input or to remove the blank and white spaces. To tokenize our input means what we will do, we will look at the input of the program and we will categorize them. What is the type of the program in this? Even if my program is written like print f hello, what it will do, it will recognize each and everything and will convert it into lexemes, and then it will recognize whether it is an integer or a keyword or a variable or a aliasing. Okay, so that is actually done by a lexical analysis of the program. And here the fourth option says data flow analysis. No, this is not the answer. Data flow analysis is used to check the flow of the program, means to check the loop condition, jump conditions, and these kind of things. We make flow, right? If the condition is true, then like this. So that is used for data flow analysis, used for that purpose, for the loop, jump condition, and all these things. Okay, so for the keyword recognition we use the lexical analysis of the program, and it comes before the parsing or the semantic analysis of our program. So that is why C is right answer here clearly. So we have our next question, which says a system program that combines the separately compiled modules of a program into a form suitable for execution. Is it assembler, linking loader, cross compiler, or load and go? Load and go is nothing, so D option is clearly eliminated here. So let's look the three options. Okay, now assembler, we know why assembler is used, to convert into the assembly language. So basically this is also not the answer here. Okay, so we will see these two in detail, because many theory questions been asked on the cross compiler and linking loader also. Okay, now first of all, what is a linker? A linker, what it does is, when we execute a program, there might be many files. Okay, for a single program to execute, we will require many files, and they might be anywhere in the program, and due to dynamically linked also, they will be combined during the runtime only. Okay, so that work is actually done by the linker. What it will do, it will combine all the files at the runtime and then will execute them, will first convert them into a single file and then will execute it. What loader will do, it will convert, like what happens is, when I store my program, okay, obviously I am very useful to use my program. Let's say my program is occupying 100 bytes, so my program size, let's say from 0 to 100, but in my memory there will be so many data, I will not get the address 0 or 100. Okay, so what we do is, during the linking only we use this pseudo addresses. Okay, but what loader does, it will convert into absolute addresses and then will finally execute it. So basically linker and loader work both are done at single time. First linker, what it will do, it will take all the different files for the execution and make them into one file, and will use the codes which is suitable for it. Okay, and then what loader will do, it will execute them, and by storing them into their proper memory locations only. Okay, so here I have pasted this photo so that you can understand it. Okay, so this one says a linker is a program in a system which helps to link a object module of a program into a single object file. Okay, it performs the process of linking. Linking is the process of collecting and maintaining piece of code and data into single file. Okay, linker also link a particular module into system library. It takes object modules from assembler as input and from executable file as output for loader. Okay, so basically, in short, you can just remember this much only. No need to read out the whole, or you can make a note of it. But basically, this is the definition. Linker loads a variety of object files into a single file to make it executable. Then loader loads it into memory and execute it. And this is what they are asking. So clearly, B is the answer here. Okay. And I have read somewhere there is also a previous year question asked on the cross compiler. So that's why I'm giving definition here. A cross compiler that runs on a machine A and produces a code for the another machine B. It is capable of creating code for a platform other than the one on which the compiler is running. So this is the direct definition for the cross compiler, and it was being directly asked in the question. So you can make a note of cross compiler also. So here in 33rd question, the answer is B here, linker and loader. Always remember, linking and loader, they both are done in just single phase because their work is so combined. Linking will take all the files and merge them into one, and then what loader will do, it will store it into memory and then finally execute it. Okay, and then pass to the next phase of the compiler. Okay, you can make note of this. Okay, so we have our next question, which says the identification of common sub expressions and replacement of runtime computation by compile time computations is local optimization, constant folding, loop optimization, or the data flow analysis. Okay, so here the main work which is being done is the identification of the common sub expression so that I can reuse them, or and also the replacement of runtime computations by the compile time. Okay, so we use many optimizations techniques to improve the efficiency of our program. So we have to find who does this work. Okay, so local optimization is different thing. We limit the use of our variables. In loop optimization, we limit the use of our loop conditions. Like loop can be, if it can be reduced, then it will come under the loop optimization. Data flow analysis is totally different. It does not come under the optimizations technique. So clearly the answer is constant folding. Okay, so what is constant folding? It is replacing expression that can be computed at the compile time by its value. Okay, what I'm saying here is, let's see one by example. So let's say I have an expression which earlier I was calculated as C plus B. Okay, I was making my program and I used this kind of syntax during my program, but we all know that this can be optimized as 5 plus C plus B. So here in this expression, what I'm doing is I am giving this calculation to my CPU at the runtime, which will increase the time, which is not good. What we will do, we will try to solve the question in such a way that it will be solved during the compile time itself. We will not postpone the decision up to the runtime only. Okay, and that work is done by the constant folding, and this is one of the best technique which we use to increase the efficiency of our program. The second one is also loop optimization. This is also a very important thing. You must make a note of it that loop optimization should be there. Okay, but here the answer is B.